March 15, 1944. Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Atsugi Communications Unit, Japan. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara stared at the intercepted transmission, his third cup of bitter tea growing cold on his desk. For the past 18 hours, he and his team of Japan's finest cryptanalysts had been attempting to decode what appeared to be American Marine Corps tactical communications from the Marshall Islands operation. The sounds coming through their receivers defied every analytical technique in their arsenal. Beshlo na haides kiz, walla chi biso di. These weren't random noises. The patterns suggested structured military communication, timing that preceded American attacks, duration consistent with operational orders, frequency usage matching Marine Corps protocols. Yet the language itself remained impenetrable, unlike anything in their extensive files on Allied communication systems. Like, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden World War II stories. What Kurihara didn't know, what no Japanese intelligence officer would understand until after the war, was that he was listening to the only unbroken code in modern military history. A code that would help decide the fate of the Pacific War. The story begins not in the Pacific, but in the American Southwest, where for over a millennium the Navajo people had preserved a language unlike any other on Earth. Diné Bizard, the Navajo language, belongs to the Athabascan language family with approximately 170,000 speakers in 1940, confined almost entirely to the 27,000 square mile reservation spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The linguistic characteristics that would confound Japanese codebreakers had evolved over centuries. Navajo is fundamentally verb-centered, with actions described through complex prefix combinations that can number in the millions. A single verb can contain information that would require an entire sentence in English. The word yiscome doesn't just mean he is going. It specifies the subject is third person, the action is ongoing, the movement is away from the speaker, and the actor is singular. The language employs 4 distinct tones, high, low, rising, and falling, that completely alter word meanings. The word ma can mean mother, hand, coyote, or serve as a question particle, depending entirely on tonal inflection. A slight mispronunciation doesn't just change a word, it can render an entire sentence incomprehensible. The phonology includes sounds absent from Japanese, English, and most world languages. Ejective stops where air explodes using the glottis, a voiceless lateral fricative that sounds like wind through teeth, glottalized sonorants, and nasalized. Vowels. For Japanese speakers trained in a language with just 5 vowel sounds, accurately hearing these phonemes was virtually impossible. But the complexity ran deeper. Navajo employs what linguists call evidentiality markers. Speakers must indicate whether they witnessed events directly, heard about them, or are making assumptions. Military communications inherently involve different types of knowledge, creating additional layers of meaning incomprehensible to outsiders. Philip Johnston understood this linguistic fortress's military potential. Born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary on the Navajo reservation, Johnston grew up speaking Navajo fluently, one of fewer than 30 non-Navajos worldwide who could make that claim. By age 9, he was translating his father's sermons. By 15, he had traveled to Washington to translate for Navajo leaders, meeting President Theodore Roosevelt. Johnston's unique perspective came from understanding both cultures intimately. He witnessed the boarding school system's attempts to kill the Indian, save the man. Navajo children forbidden to speak their native language, punished with beatings, soap forced into their mouths, hands tied behind their backs for hours. Yet he also recognized the language's sophisticated structure, its resistance to outside influence, and its potential military applications. The catalyst came in December 1941. As America reeled from Pearl Harbor, Johnston read about Army units using Comanche speakers in Louisiana training exercises. The Choctaw had served in World War I, but those efforts were improvised and limited. Johnston envisioned something revolutionary, a formal military code based on Navajo that would be both unbreakable and practical for modern warfare. His proposal went beyond simple translation. Johnston understood that military terminology would require creative adaptation, that the code needed systematic organization, and that training would be crucial. Most importantly, he recognized that Navajo's complexity made it naturally resistant to cryptanalysis. On February 28, 1942, Johnston presented his proposal to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego. The demonstration was remarkable. 4 Navajos from Los Angeles, recruited from urban workers who maintained their language skills, transmitted complex messages while Marine officers timed them against standard procedures. The results were staggering. The Navajo speakers completed transmissions in 20 seconds versus 30 minutes for the M209 cipher machine. More importantly, they maintained perfect accuracy under pressure, something mechanical devices couldn't guarantee in combat conditions. General Vogel was initially skeptical. Military doctrine favored mechanical encryption systems. Machines could be mass-produced, operators easily trained, and procedures standardized. Using a human language seemed primitive, unreliable, but the demonstration's success convinced him to authorize a pilot program. The challenges were immediate. How many Navajo speakers could the military recruit? Would they pass security clearances? Could the language handle technical military terminology? Most critically, could a code based on Navajo remain secure if enemies suspected its nature? On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits were sworn in at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. These men, including Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Bennerly, came from across the reservation, representing diverse backgrounds and experiences. Some had attended boarding schools where speaking Navajo was forbidden and punished. Others were traditional sheep herders who rarely left their ancestral lands. A few were college-educated, while others had minimal formal schooling. What united them was fluency in both Navajo and English, physical fitness for Marine service, and willingness to volunteer for classified duty. Many came from families with military traditions. Navajo warriors had fought alongside Kit Carson, served as Army scouts, and participated in World War II War I. Despite not being U.S. citizens until 1924, at Camp Elliott they worked in a locked, guarded building for 8 weeks, creating a military code within their native language. The task was monumental: develop terminology for concepts that didn't exist in Navajo, create an alphabet system for spelling non-Navajo words, ensure memorability for field use, and design expandability for future needs. The security was unprecedented. Guards were posted outside the building 24 hours daily. Windows were painted black. No written materials could leave the facility. The Marines understood they were creating something that could change the war's outcome. The code's construction demonstrated remarkable cultural logic and linguistic sophistication. The original 29 divided into specialized teams. One group developed military terminology, another created the alphabet system, and a third designed transmission procedures. For military equipment, they used cultural metaphors that made sense to Navajo speakers, but remained meaningless to outsiders. A submarine became Beshlo, iron fish swimming beneath the surface. A battleship was Lotso, whale, the ocean's largest creature. Fighter planes were Da-Heti-Hi, hummingbirds darting through air. Bombers were Jaysho, buzzards circling before descending on prey. The metaphorical system extended to tactics and strategy. A flanking maneuver became Behna al-Kahi, surrounding like wolves. Artillery bombardment was Be-El-Don Squodi, like many guns speaking. An amphibious assault was Talka Silago, sea soldiers coming to shore. The alphabet required special creativity. Each letter needed multiple Navajo words to prevent frequency analysis. The cryptographic technique that had broken many codes by identifying commonly used letters. The letter A received 3 alternatives: Wullachi, ant; Belasana, apple; and Tsinil, axe. The letter E, most common in English, received 4 alternatives: Aja, ear; Zer, elk; Ana, eye; and Zia, elk. Code talkers would randomly alternate between options, destroying any patterns that could reveal frequency distributions. They memorized all 211 initial terms perfectly. No codebooks could risk capture in combat. The cultural significance of this work cannot be overstated. In Navajo tradition, words possess spiritual power. Speaking correctly was sacred responsibility. The young Marines understood they were adapting their holy language for warfare, creating tension between cultural values and military necessity. Chester Nez recalled, We drilled endlessly. A mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words have power. Speaking correctly was sacred, but we also understood we were defending our homeland, our families, our way of life. Many code talkers struggled with this duality. Traditional Navajo ceremonies emphasized harmony, healing, and balance. Now they were using their language to direct violence and death. Some sought guidance from medicine men who performed special ceremonies to protect the warriors and maintain spiritual balance. Carl Gorman explained, "Our language was given to us by the holy people. Using it to fight felt like sacrilege. But our elders told us we were protecting all native peoples, preserving our languages and cultures for future generations. That made it sacred work." The code's first test came at Guadalcanal in August 1942. 15 code talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division, facing immediate challenges that no training could fully prepare them for. The Japanese had expected the invasion, having decoded other Allied communications throughout the early war period. But suddenly, Marine tactical messages became incomprehensible. At Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers scrambled to understand these transmissions. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, educated at Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like language with consistent patterns, but it matches nothing. Not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, any Philippine dialect, any Chinese dialect. Completely alien." The Japanese response was systematic and sophisticated. They assigned their top cryptanalysts, recorded hundreds of hours on wax cylinders, applied every analytical technique in their considerable arsenal. They consulted university linguists, Buddhist monks who studied ancient languages, even German cryptographers via submarine communication. Nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, code talker Chester Nez transmitted artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest threatening Marine advance. The 14-second transmission was intercepted by Japanese monitoring stations but remained meaningless noise to their operators. Within minutes, American shells fell precisely on target, eliminating the threat and allowing the advance to continue. Colonel Haruo Konuma, intelligence officer for the Japanese 17th Army, wrote in his diary, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt at cryptanalysis. We can no longer anticipate their attacks with any reliability. We are fighting blind against an enemy whose communications remain completely opaque." Joe Kiyumiya, a Navajo soldier captured at Bataan in April 1942, became Japan's best hope for breaking the mysterious code. Though fluent in Navajo, he had no knowledge of the military code being developed back home. The original 29 were just beginning their work when he was captured. When Japanese cryptographers began intercepting Navajo transmissions in late 1942, they brought Kiyumiya to the Bunker Interrogation Center near Tokyo. They played him code talker recordings, expecting immediate translation. Instead, Kiyumiya heard Navajo words in meaningless combinations. The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird carries eggs to the whale. Many buzzards circle the ant hill. When he couldn't translate these obviously nonsensical phrases, interrogators accused him of lying. The torture escalated systematically over months. Water torture, forcing water into his lungs until he nearly drowned. Beatings with bamboo rods until bones broke. Hanging by his arms for hours until shoulders dislocated. In winter 1943, they forced him to stand naked in snow until his feet froze to the ground. They starved him to 90 pounds, offering food only for translations he couldn't provide. They burned him with cigarettes, pulled out fingernails, subjected him to sleep deprivation for weeks. Through everything, Kiyumiya could only repeat the truth. He understood the individual Navajo words, but not their military meaning. A Japanese intelligence report from May 1943 documented their growing frustration. The prisoner appears native to the mystery language, but cannot comprehend transmitted messages. Assessment: either extraordinary resistance to interrogation or enemy employs specialized code within native language requiring specific training unknown to civilian speakers. The second assessment was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers couldn't understand code talker transmissions without specific military training. Kiyumiya survived 3.5 years of captivity. His inability to help convincing Japanese intelligence they faced something unprecedented in cryptographic history. Success at Guadalcanal led to immediate program expansion. Major General Alexander Vandergrift wrote to Marine headquarters, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable beyond all expectations. Their transmissions are faster than any encoding device currently available and absolutely secure against enemy cryptanalysis." A formal code talker school at Camp Pendleton began processing classes every 8 weeks. Recruitment expanded across the reservation, though requirements remained strict. Fluency in both Navajo and English, physical fitness for combat duty, security clearance approval, and psychological evaluation for handling classified materials. Training evolved based on combat experience. Recruits practiced in soundproof booths while instructors introduced realistic battlefield noises. Explosions, gunfire, aircraft engines, artillery bombardments. They transmitted wearing gas masks to simulate chemical attack conditions. They practiced while running to exhaustion, simulating combat stress and physical demands. Thomas Begay, who enlisted at age 15 by lying about his birth date, described the intensity. "They pushed us beyond what seemed possible. We understood that lives depended on our accuracy under the worst possible conditions. Every mistake in training was a life potentially lost in combat." By war's end, between 375 and 420, Navajo Marines had served as code talkers across all 6 Marine divisions, a remarkable contribution from a population of just 170,000. The code expanded continuously as warfare evolved. New technologies required new vocabulary. The atomic bomb became ayeshi, metal egg that brings great destruction. Kamikaze pilots were nayeli, death wind from the sky. Radar became bieltso-os, metal eyes that see far. Each edition followed logical cultural patterns comprehensible to Navajo speakers, but meaningless to outsiders. Jet aircraft were tsinai-go-hai, metal birds with fire tails. Flamethrowers became tuka-go-ne, fire that spreads like water. Amphibious vehicles were tsiga-nei, land boats that swim. The code's flexibility amazed military linguists. Dr. William Morgan, who studied the system after the war, noted, "They demonstrated that indigenous languages aren't primitive communication systems, but sophisticated tools capable of expressing anything from traditional ceremonies to advanced military technology." The speed with which they created new terminology showed remarkable linguistic creativity. By mid-1943, Japanese intelligence dedicated enormous resources to breaking the Marine Code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 cryptanalysts exclusively to these transmissions, more personnel than dedicated to breaking British or Soviet codes. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka tried increasingly desperate approaches. Musical analysis searched for tonal patterns, comparison with Native American recordings from anthropological collections, consultation with scholars who had studied in America before the war. They developed special recording equipment to slow transmissions without distorting pitch. They created visual sound representations using primitive oscilloscopes. They applied statistical analysis to sound frequencies and duration patterns. Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada later revealed they identified certain operational patterns. Probable call signs, correlation between message length and operation complexity, timing relationships between transmissions and subsequent American actions. But without understanding actual words, these provided minimal tactical value. The Japanese offered extraordinary rewards for intelligence breakthroughs. Rewards of 10,000 yen, equivalent to 10 years' salary for most Japanese, were offered for capture of code talker equipment or materials. Several close calls occurred, but no code talker was ever captured with communications equipment intact. The Central Pacific Campaign demonstrated the code talker's strategic importance. At Tarawa, in November 1943, 6 code talkers maintained communications through 76 hours of the most brutal combat in Marine Corps history. The Coral Atoll's geography created unique communication challenges. Radio waves bounced unpredictably, requiring constant adjustment and retransmission. Lloyd Oliver transmitted continuously for 48 hours, coordinating naval gunfire support despite constant shelling that destroyed equipment around him repeatedly. He adapted to equipment failures by switching between radio sets, maintaining contact even when shrapnel damaged antennas and concussion waves disrupted transmission clarity. During the Marianas Campaign, 24 code talkers operated around the clock at Saipan. Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Hirakawa had successfully decoded conventional American communications to anticipate the invasion's timing and location. But once Marines landed, tactical intelligence disappeared completely. Colonel Takeshi Saito noted in his final report, division and regimental commanders felt abandoned without the detailed tactical intelligence they had depended upon throughout the war. American assault coordination appeared seamless and instantaneous, suggesting communication capabilities we could not comprehend. At Peleliu, code talker Jimmy King faced the ultimate test of dedication and skill. When his transmission partner was killed by sniper fire during a Japanese counterattack, King continued operating alone for 6 continuous hours. He coordinated artillery support from 3 separate battalions, sending 40 critical messages without error while under direct enemy fire. King's position was exposed on a coral ridge, making him visible to Japanese observers. Enemy mortars and rifle fire targeted his location continuously, but he refused to abandon his post. Marine riflemen formed a protective perimeter but couldn't eliminate all threats. During the most intense period, King transmitted while lying flat against coral rocks, using his dead partner's body as shield against shrapnel. His radio equipment was damaged repeatedly. He jury-rigged repairs using salvaged parts from destroyed radios, maintaining communication through improvisation and determination. Major Frank Howe later wrote, King's performance represented the Code Talker program's finest hour. Under conditions that would break most men, he maintained perfect communication discipline. His accuracy and composure under fire saved hundreds of Marine lives. The battle for Iwo Jima represented the Code Talker's greatest contribution to Pacific victory. Major Howard Connor coordinated the entire initial assault through Navajo Code communications. 6 Code Talkers working in rotating teams maintained continuous communication throughout the invasion's critical first 48 hours. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had prepared Iwo Jima's defenses for 2 years, constructing an underground fortress with 11 miles of interconnected tunnels, reinforced bunkers, and carefully positioned artillery. His defensive strategy relied heavily on intercepting American communications to trigger coordinated counterattacks at the most vulnerable moments. This strategy failed completely due to the Navajo Code. Over 48 hours, the 6 Code Talkers sent and received over 800 messages without a single error. They coordinated the landing of 30,000 Marines, naval gunfire from 100 ships, close air support missions, enemy position reports, medical evacuations, supply requests, and tactical orders, all while under constant artillery bombardment and sniper fire. Major Connor later testified before Congress, were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. During the first 48 hours, I had 6 Navajo radio nets operating around the clock. They sent and received over 800 messages without error. The entire operation was coordinated through Navajo Code. The speed advantage proved decisive. Artillery requests completed in 20 seconds through Navajo transmissions would have required 30 minutes using conventional encoding methods. The difference between destroying enemy positions and losing assault teams to counterattack. Colonel Shingo Hayashi reported to Kuribayashi that American tactical communications remained completely unbreakable despite concentrated intelligence efforts. Japanese commanders, accustomed to detailed intelligence from intercepted communications, found themselves fighting blind against an enemy whose coordination appeared supernatural. At Okinawa, 35 Code Talkers coordinated the largest Pacific assault. 183,000 American troops, over 82 days of savage fighting. Japanese forces attempted new countermeasures, radio jamming, voice mimicry, and signal triangulation to locate Code Talker positions for targeted attacks. The jamming efforts failed because Navajo's tonal qualities made it resistant to electronic interference that disrupted other languages. Japanese attempts at voice mimicry produced results that, according to Code Talker Alfred Newman, sounded like someone gargling while trying to talk, completely unconvincing to anyone familiar with actual Navajo pronunciation. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto's unit spent weeks recording and analyzing Code Talker transmissions, attempting to identify individual speakers and develop mimicry techniques. They practiced pronunciation drills and studied captured American equipment for clues about transmission procedures. Their efforts produced sounds that might fool electronic equipment, but couldn't deceive human listeners familiar with Navajo's complex phonology. Signal triangulation proved more dangerous, allowing Japanese artillery to target suspected code talker positions. However, Marine counterintelligence developed mobile transmission protocols, moving radio equipment frequently and using relay systems to disguise actual transmission locations. On August 14, 1945, code talker Teddy Draper transmitted the war's most significant message: Nahelma Adaigini Adanil, Japanese surrender. The message went through Navajo channels before conventional communication networks, a fitting end to the code talkers' war. The surrender announcement created unique challenges: how to express unconditional surrender in a language that traditionally viewed warfare differently. The code talkers developed Juba Iltaga Nilech, enemy throws away weapons completely, meaning they give up everything without conditions. President Truman's announcement reached Pacific forces through multiple channels, but Navajo code talkers often delivered the news first to forward units still engaged with Japanese forces. The speed and reliability of their communications proved crucial during the dangerous transition period when some Japanese units continued fighting despite official surrender orders. After the war, American interrogators discovered the full extent of Japanese cryptanalytic efforts and their complete failure against Navajo code transmissions. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisue, Japan's chief of intelligence, admitted, "We never broke the Marine Tactical Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic traffic from multiple nations. But the Marine Tactical Code remained completely secure throughout the entire war." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto was more specific about their failure. "We recorded thousands of Marine transmissions over 3 years. Our best linguists, mathematicians, and communications experts studied them continuously. Nothing worked. It represented our greatest cryptanalytic failure of the entire war." In 1944, Japanese analysts had identified tonal patterns suggesting indigenous American languages. They requested assistance from German cryptographers, but wartime communication difficulties and German unfamiliarity with Native American languages prevented any breakthrough. Colonel Masao Yamada's post-war testimony was particularly revealing. "Our inability to read Marine communications cost thousands of Japanese lives. Every Marine operation after 1942 remained a complete mystery until American forces actually landed. We lost our primary tactical advantage, advanced intelligence that allowed defensive preparation." Major Hiroshi Tanaka, who survived Iwo Jima, described the psychological impact on Japanese forces. "Not understanding their communications made us feel primitive, intellectually defeated before battles even began. Our soldiers whispered that Americans possessed supernatural communication abilities. The war's end didn't end the code talkers' burden. The program remained classified for potential Cold War use against the Soviet Union. Military planners recognized that Russian cryptographers might succeed where Japanese had failed, but Native American languages remained potential assets for future conflicts. Code talkers returned home unable to discuss their service with anyone: wives, children, parents, or tribal elders who might have provided traditional healing ceremonies for warriors returning from battle. They returned to states that denied them voting rights until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona, 1957 in Utah. Hotels and restaurants refused them service under Jim Crow laws that treated Native Americans as second-class citizens. The psychological toll was severe. Many code talkers had used their sacred language to direct death and destruction, creating spiritual conflicts that required traditional healing. But they couldn't discuss their service to explain their need for ceremonial treatment. Chester Nez, last survivor of the original 29, wrote, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but couldn't tell anyone about our contribution. The burden was incredibly heavy. Some of us found healing through traditional ceremonies performed in secret." Dan Aki explained the spiritual dimension. "We had used our sacred language to direct death across the Pacific. Traditional Navajo culture requires ceremony to purify warriors after contact with death and violence. The enemy way ceremony cleanses spiritual contamination from warfare. But we couldn't explain why we needed these rituals." In 1968, the program was finally declassified. The first public recognition came in 1969 at a 4th Marine Division reunion. where code talkers could finally discuss their service openly after 24 years of enforced silence. The recognition process was gradual but increasingly meaningful. President Reagan declared August 14, 1982, as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. State recognitions followed throughout the 1980s and 1990s as the full story became known. The most significant honor came July 26, 2001, when President George W. Bush presented congressional gold medals to the original 29 in the Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 original code talkers survived to attend the ceremony, but their achievement was finally acknowledged at the highest national level. President Bush declared, "Today we honor 29 Native Americans who gave their country a service that only they could give. They served with remarkable skill and extraordinary courage, and we thank them for their service to our nation." Chester Nez, speaking for his fallen comrades, responded, "We were ordinary young men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war and protect our homeland. We're honored to be recognized, but we never forgot that we served alongside thousands of other Native American warriors who deserve equal recognition." While Navajos are most famous, 14 other tribes provided code talkers during both World Wars. Choctaw soldiers pioneered the concept in World War I, using their language for tactical communications during the Meuse-Argonne offensive in 1918. Their success proved that Native American languages could serve military purposes effectively. In World War II, 17 Comanche code talkers served in Europe, landing at D-Day and fighting through the European campaign. Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, Creek, Seminole, and other tribes contributed their languages to the war effort. Each language group developed specialized military terminology and transmission procedures adapted to their linguistic structures. The 2008 Code Talkers Recognition Act acknowledged all tribal contributions, but the Navajo program remained the most extensive and well-documented. The scale of their contribution, over 400 Marines serving across all Pacific campaigns, demonstrated the military effectiveness of indigenous language codes. John Brown Jr., a Hopi code talker, observed, "For generations, they told us our languages were primitive, useless in the modern world. Then they needed those same languages to win the war. It proved that traditional knowledge has continuing value even in technological warfare." The code talkers demonstrated Native American languages' sophisticated structure and adaptability. Code talkers modernized Navajo in real time, creating grammatical constructions and adapting metaphors for military purposes. The agglutinative nature of Navajo allowed complex ideas to be expressed in single words. What required paragraphs in English became brief Navajo phrases. Dr. William Morgan, linguist who studied the code after the war, noted, "They proved that indigenous languages aren't primitive communication systems, but sophisticated tools capable of expressing anything from traditional ceremonies to advanced military technology." The speed with which they created new terminology demonstrated remarkable linguistic creativity and cultural adaptability. The code's success influenced post-war attitudes toward Native American languages. Federal education policies began incorporating native language instruction. University linguistics programs started serious study of indigenous languages as sophisticated communication systems rather than historical curiosities. Modern Navajo language education references the code talker story as proof of the language's contemporary relevance. Young Native Americans study ancestral languages with new pride, understanding that traditional knowledge possesses strategic value in modern contexts. The Navajo Code represented a revolutionary approach to military cryptography. Security through linguistic barriers rather than mathematical complexity. This concept influenced post-war intelligence operations and remains relevant as quantum computing threatens traditional mathematical encryption methods. Colonel David Hatch, National Security Agency historian, evaluated the code's significance. The Navajo Code Talkers achieved something unique in cryptographic history. A code that was never broken, never compromised, and remained secure under the most intensive analysis. They proved that human linguistic diversity could provide security advantages that mechanical encryption systems couldn't match. The code's principles influenced modern cryptographic thinking. Cultural encryption, security based on knowledge unavailable to adversaries, became a recognized concept in intelligence operations. The idea that linguistic diversity could provide strategic advantages challenged traditional approaches to military communications. In the 1980s, Japanese scholarship began examining their wartime cryptanalytic failure with remarkable honesty. Professor Taro Yoshikawa revealed that 30 cryptanalysts worked exclusively on marine transmissions for 2 years, consulting linguists from multiple universities without success. Captain Minoru Yamada's memoir disclosed, "We identified the transmissions as Native American by late 1943, but couldn't determine which specific language or dialect. The tonal qualities suggested several possibilities, but we lacked expertise in American indigenous languages." Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Fukumoto admitted, "Using a native language as military code was elegantly simple. We prepared for complex mathematical ciphers and mechanical encryption devices. The possibility of linguistic cryptography was so straightforward that we never seriously considered it." In the 1990s, photographer Kenji Kawano documented surviving code talkers, creating exhibitions in Tokyo and Hiroshima that introduced Japanese audiences to the story. Code talker Albert Smith told Japanese audiences, "We were both warriors serving our countries. My language helped defeat yours in battle, but now it can help us understand each other as human beings." Chester Nez, last survivor of the original 29, died June 4, 2014, at age 93. His passing marked the end of an era. The men who created the Unbreakable code were gone forever. Today, only a handful of code talkers survive from the approximately 400 who served. These elderly warriors continue speaking at schools, museums, and veteran organizations, sharing their story with new generations. Peter MacDonald, former Navajo Nation chairman and code talker veteran, continues speaking at age 96. "We demonstrated that America's strength comes from diversity. Our different languages, cultures, and perspectives make us stronger as a nation. The code talkers proved that differences aren't weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be celebrated and preserved." Thomas B. Gay, another survivor, emphasizes the ongoing relevance. "Young Native Americans need to understand that their languages and cultures aren't museum pieces. They're living resources with continuing value. Our ancestors' knowledge can still serve modern purposes." The Navajo language, once suppressed by federal boarding schools, is now recognized as strategically important cultural heritage. Federal funding supports language preservation programs that explicitly reference the code talker story as justification for maintaining linguistic diversity. Modern Navajo Nation schools teach both traditional language skills and the code talker history. Students learn that their ancestors' primitive language helped win the world's most technologically advanced war. This knowledge instills pride in traditional culture while demonstrating its contemporary relevance. Dr. Jennifer Nez Dennett-Dale, historian and code talker descendant, observed, "The code talkers transformed how Native Americans see themselves and how America sees Native Americans. They proved that indigenous knowledge isn't historical artifact, but living wisdom with continuing strategic value. The broader impact extends beyond Native American communities. The code talker story has become a powerful symbol of diversity's strength in American society. Their example demonstrates that minority contributions enhance rather than weaken national security and social cohesion."